evening, cult members, and welcome to Pop Culture Cult. I'm Sean.
I'm Janice.
And this is going to be our reaction and discussion of episode 8 of Andor, called Nakina 5, which is the prison planet that Andor is sent to.
Right.
Cassian is sent to.
Yep.
A little housekeeping. We missed last week because we were having a hell of a good time in Los Angeles.
Right. We were at Disneyland.
We were at Disneyland. Actually, we might have been feet up in and icing our arches. We did watch last week's episode when we got home. That episode and this episode feel like we're setting up for the last little push for the last, which will be 4 episodes after this one.
Right. So, I mean, they did that with the first half, right? It was kind of slowly kind of ratcheting up the tension and the, what was getting ready to happen with the heist, and now we're kind of doing that, moving towards.
I think what it ultimately is going to, or wildly speculating right now, is the penultimate episode. It's a big word for Alma. That's going to be them getting Cassian out of prison, and that's going to be some of the rebel cells coming together for this other big thing that Luthen went to Saw with.
Yeah.
We'll get into that whole scene eventually, but we sat down to start watching the episode with dinner, and it's at 56 minutes, and there's like 4 to 6 minutes of credits and title sequences and recaps and stuff like that. So 50 minutes, and I told her each episode's been 40 to 50 minutes, and there's 12 episodes, so they are definitely in a pattern of letting the story breathe and working our way through everything, which is a very Game of Thrones kind of concept, although House of the Dragon was much faster at times this season, because they had to kind of get the kids aged up to get to where they need to go with that. But I really like The Mandalorian, and I really like Book of Boba Fett, and the storytelling process, the serial storytelling process that they were doing with that each episode was its own little thing. This is a full-on one story arc. We're going to let things breathe and figure themselves out.
Yep.
And some people have said that the ratings are down because we know what happens to Andor, and engagement is down because there's not a ton of who's that character, what's this Easter egg and stuff like that, which is there's a weird conversation going on how to track streaming services viewing rates anyways. But this, allowing this to be its own thing and let it breathe and let the characters work their way out, and figuring out why Cassian makes the decision to go on the suicide run to Scarif. I love it. And I love the Book of Boba Fett, so I can love both kind of setups and how they're doing it.
Yeah,
and stuff.
No, I Rogue One was its own thing. It was Star Wars. You never didn't feel like it was Star Wars.
Right.
But it also at the same time felt like it wasn't Star Wars.
Right.
Because it was, so different from the Skywalker saga, right? And so it's fine that this is different. I'm appreciating the ratcheting up the tension, and then the big the big heist or whatever, and now we're back to ratcheting up the tension again, and
and the prison break that's coming.
Right. And you've spent time with these people now, Biggs and Cassian's mom, and
Marverna. Of course, it's not on the one I actually picked. Just keep talking.
and Cassian, obviously, and Kern, and the um the chick, the
Deirdre,
yeah, the Imperial,
ISB,
yeah, the ISB, yeah. So everything has stakes, right? You have spent time with these people, and so now you're worried for them, or concerned.
And the other thing too about what's been going on with the show is decisions and actions that someone else takes is having consequences and stakes for someone else.
Yeah.
Or something that you did, Andor pulling off this heist, gets arrested for walking down the beach.
Yeah.
And I really want to spend some time. There's a ton of stuff in this episode. And one of the things I've been talking about from the beginning of this show, that I'm going to continue to talk about until I'm blue in the face, blue is the wall behind me, is we are getting to see the actual fascist dictatorship that is the Empire.
Yeah.
Actually see it. Not talked about in secondhand or the big bad who's pulling it all. The actual foot soldiers on the ground who are abusing their power out of the whole context of safety for all.
Right.
And the conversation that Mon Mothma has at her vote raising party at her home with the other members of, I don't know if they're senators or if they're just influential people or whatever.
Yeah.
But the round conversation with the camera spinning around and listening to all of them, and several of the people in that group kind of questioning why we would want to stop Palpatine from putting in all of these new measures,
safety measures, except a couple of them are pointing out why do we need to be like, what? I don't not feel safe.
Yeah, and that I love. The deeper I'm going to go into this conversation, the more I'm going to love this episode. That right there, that little conversation of 3 minutes or whatever is a direct parallel to the real world and the Patriot Act. It's a direct 1-to-1 comparison.
Yeah.
And yes, in the wake of 9/11, we need to be better about getting our information out and tracking down people who actually want to do harm to us. But what's the cost of doing that extra level of security for safety and things?
Well, and it's not just the Patriot Act. I mean, there are so many things that, in the moment. I mean, it's constant nowadays, right? There's things that in the moment, many people, the majority even, are like, this is a great idea, and let's move forward. And there are always, at least in America, there are always people questioning, which is good. And then 5 years later, everybody's looking back going, oh my God, that was a terrible idea, and look where we're at now. Because I mean, it happens. It can be a good thing, like something that you're like, yeah, this seems really good, and 4 or 5 years down the line, you're like, wow, that really did not turn out well, and vice versa.
Right.
But it's nice to see, Star Wars, not the stormtroopers marching down the hall of a spaceship, and meanwhile on Tatooine, and this is actual conversations with people, actual day-to-day lives of people, both the people on the planets who are just trying to make their way, and the people in the ISB and the Empire, and the Senate and all of that, trying, some of them pushing forward the agenda and some of them questioning the agenda. So it's a way deeper dive, not just, like I said, stormtroopers marching down the halls.
You ever watched a movie and thought, like, this is just visually amazing, and I just love the way it looks, and the colors are amazing? Well, our friends over at Movie Palette have come up with these great pieces of art that you could put up on your wall to show your love of movies without really necessarily being overly dramatic about it. Think of a movie barcode kind of thing, where you can look at the colors and know what the movie is, but it's very, very subtle. If you know us, we are into Tron Legacy. The music and the lights and the color itself is just amazing. Just to give you an idea of what they have, go to moviepalette.com, find your own personal favorite movie, your movie color palette, and have it hang on your wall. At checkout, put in Pop Culture 15 to get 15% off. Thank you, Movie Palette, for sponsoring this video. Link is in the description down below. And don't forget, use Pop Culture 15 at checkout to get 15% off your order. I feel like some people are going to miss the point of that conversation. I think a lot of people are going to miss the idea of pointing out what the ISB is doing. They're torturing people to get information that works so well at Guantanamo Bay. Even on Ferrex, when they finally arrest Biggs and the shop owner whose name I can't remember off the top of my head. Even that, it's the city is standing around in this little hallway. There's 4 stormtroopers and 5 Imperial officers. They can overwhelm them at no point in time, but the idea of keeping that fear, it's a big step to be the first one to walk up and say, no, you can't do this.
Yeah.
And especially in Ferrex, all they really want to do is just live their lives.
Yeah.
And now they have this Imperial occupation that's going on.
Although they do feel, again, it's going back to the ratcheting up the tension, right? That the city does feel like it's on the cusp.
Right.
And
right.
it has for a while. And, we see in the flashback when Cassian watched his dad, was hung, and his mom was saying, I can't even walk through the square and all that. So this has been going on for a while, and they even have kind of an alarm system, right? So it's a city on the edge, and I don't know if they will continue to keep their peace when they find out that these two were tortured.
It's definitely leaning towards Ferrex being the spark.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of hard-working, factory working. They're in, they're in good shape. They could take some hammers and start, it's the Scots all over again.
I was going to say Pittsburgh. Trying to, if you occupied Pittsburgh and you were oppressive to Pittsburgh for a long time, they have zero stuff about any of that. Philadelphia's the same way.
Yeah.
But just that kind of that idea is that's that blue collar kind of people who, sure, you guys can run the security or whatever. We don't care. Just leave us be. And that more oppression that they do, which is what Luthen is trying to push for.
Right.
Luthen. We're going to talk about Andor at some point in time in the Andor show.
He actually says it to Saw.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going.
Them to be oppressed because they will start to fight back.
If the Empire spends more and more time oppressing the people will finally step up.
Right.
And this was one of the things that they talked about in the previous episode was in previous episodes, I won't say it wasn't just necessarily the last one, but they've been talking about this concept of the Empire is slowly choking everybody to death, and the people are accepting it. They're not seeing what's going on.
Right.
And it's that next little, on Tuesdays you can't wear black. And now on Tuesdays and Wednesdays you can't wear black.
Yeah.
And then on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays you can't wear black. Okay, you can't wear black at all during the week, but only religious ceremonies. There's been this kind of, that's a weird example, but that's kind of what's been going on the entire time.
Well, it's the how do you the frog in the boiling water, right? You don't put the frog into the boiling water. You put the frog in the water and you start turning the heat up, and by the time it realizes it's being boiled to death, it's too late.
It's too late, yeah.
And that's what's been going on.
Yeah.
And Luthen wants to just crank the heat up now and just, wake everybody up.
And which is, I think, storytelling wise, it's hard for us to watch it happen because Luthen is putting billions of life forms in harm's way, and he is definitely he's not a good person. He's definitely not a good person, but he sees what's going on.
Yeah.
And he can't stand back and do nothing. And if he stood back and did nothing, eventually, he even says it in this episode when he's talking to Saw. He says, I'm a coward. I'm also tired of watching Empire build to a point that eventually they're going to get to a point that we can't do anything about it.
Right.
And so when he goes to Saw and tries to get Saw to work with somebody else, another rebel cell, like that whole conversation is so impactful because they start off kind of like good old friends, kind of poking fun at each other, and the idea of, oh, you pulled the heist. No, you pulled the heist. You were so good. You're so smart.
Yeah.
Like that kind of deflection back and forth between them. But ultimately, what it comes down to is Luthen is right.
Yeah.
It's hard to say it, but Luthen is right with the concept of, if we don't press the Empire to press the people, it's not going to matter eventually.
Right. And I don't know if Luthen isn't a good person. I think he actually is a good person, and that's why he's so conflicted all the time. Like that he messed up with Cassian. Like and I think that the reason why he feels like he messed up is because like he kind of took him in personally and took him on a ship, and so Cassian knows probably more about him than anybody other than his
the assistant at the
and Mon, yeah,
right.
and now he's just out there floating around, and he doesn't really know where that information has gone,
right,
and
right.
And when they got the telegraph, from for lack of a better term, from Binks, it like she's like, you need to tell me to turn it off, because what he wanted to do was reply.
Right. He wants to reply, and I think he wants to run off and either save Cassian,
yeah,
or eliminate Cassian, because it's a loose string that he doesn't have control of.
Right. Yeah. So I think he is actually a good person slash coward. I mean, I think that good people would be more cowardly in that situation, because you just don't, you're doing a lot of bad things to a lot of people.
Right, that's fair.
For a ultimate, hopefully good outcome for everyone.
Right. Right.
So
I want to talk about the line specifically when Saw asks him who you are, and Luthen stops and says, I'm a coward. That's the first thing he says.
Yeah.
After thinking about it. I have been on the Luthen is a former Jedi. I have been on that path for a while. Do I think it has any merit? No. But it seems very it seems appropriate that he is some type of wayfinder that is being used. Like, he was a Jedi on his own path, looking for antiquities or whatever it was, who didn't have the 501st with him when Order 66 happened. Or when Order 66 happened, he ran away instead of actually staying and fighting.
Or he could have been trained and never got, he was a Padawan.
That's fair.
And didn't have what it took or whatever, and so he's got that training,
right?
But he wasn't a Jedi, or he wasn't around at the time of.
It's an interesting point, because that's something that they brought up in the Brotherhood book about Padawans who are Force sensitive, go through the early trainings at the Jedi Academy, the Jedi Temple, and then realize that the life of a Jedi in using the Force and all of that is not their truest calling.
Yeah.
And it very much feels like he could have been somebody who, when the going got tough, he decided to run away or give up or whatever.
Or he hid during Order 66, and that's why he calls himself a coward.
Yes, I think that is very much possible too, but I think he's not a Padawan when 66 happens, because it's only a 9-year gap.
Right, he could have been a Jedi.
Right, a Jedi who
hid, and so he's calling himself a coward now.
And some of my actual thinking about this is when he shows up on Ferrix in the second episode, his cane looks very lightsabery. Yep. The handle looks very lightsabery. Yep. That in it retracts when he puts it away. He's got kind of the Jedi robes. He's got a definite confident swagger when he's being out in the world as himself and not the curator.
Right.
And if you use the example of if he's an archivist for the Jedi, he's out in the galaxy collecting different things.
Yeah.
He's not gonna be a known entity to the Empire.
Right.
Because he's gone. And if he's an antiquities dealer who can hide in plain sight, it makes a lot of sense to me, especially on Coruscant.
Yeah.
It just makes a lot of sense to me.
I mean, he could be out gathering Jedi antiquities for the sake of saving them.
Right.
And oh, by the way, I'm actually here to get this thing to go in my shop to sell, but on the sly, I'm grabbing all these whatever Jedi items.
It's also something that they deal with in the comics and the books, is this idea of looking for Jedi antiquities, and Luke does it, and Aphra does it, and so there's definitely a base for that kind of conversation to be had.
Yeah.
His conversation with Saw, he's trying to get Saw to work together on this, hitting this power. I think it's the power station, and it's Saw calling out Luthen for, what are you? What are we? What is this rebellion? I can do more by myself and hitting small targets than if we actually ever really come together, which is a complete understanding like that for a show that's not going to have Easter eggs and people, I'm going to stay on that, by the way. That is completely 100% Saw.
Yeah.
Even when at the final moments, Saw was asked to come join the bigger rebellion,
and he said no. Yep.
And so we're going to get more Saw for sure. And Forrest Whitaker was made for this role. I just love him.
It was a little shocking, not shocking, but a little shocking, because the last time we saw Forrest Whitaker as Saw, and this is only 5 years, right?
Yeah.
He is in rough shape. He's much heavier. He's breathing off an oxygen mask and all, and
he's missing a couple of legs.
Limping around. And then you see him now, and he looks like a rebel fighter, and he's got some scars on his face, but with his eye, that actually kind of works, right? So I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah. And he loves the character, so whenever he shows up,
it's totally
awesome. The Mon Mothma dinner scene, we talked about the conversation around the thing, but there's also her dealing with her husband, and they give us some more backstory that their relationship was an arranged marriage back on Trandrilla, close enough. And I think they actually did care for each other at some point in time, since they did have a daughter, but now Mothma is disconnected. Her husband is disconnected from everything. He's only there for the finer things in life and not the actual, because he even points it out again that the whole reason for this party is so Mon Mothma can work on getting votes to stop Palpatine from putting in this thing. And he's like, oh, go do your charity thing or whatever.
Yeah. And I mean, they seem happy enough to be in. Now, I'm sure this is her acting, but, they were happy enough to be in the situation that they are in right now.
Right.
At least as far as he's concerned, as far as what we're seeing from him.
Right.
He's He
did give some jealous looks, side eyes, when Mon met with her friend, who's working on moving money out of her account discreetly as much as possible. And so there's a little bit of building jealousy. We're not to the jealousy point, but questioning there.
Yeah, and they need to be careful. Right. Because, he shows up, they go off and, they kind of basically spend the evening talking. I mean, she does, bow out a couple of times, but they spent a lot of time the first party talking. And then he conveniently sticks around, and now he's back at their. And so, I mean, it's. I would think that it's probably better that he think they're having an affair than what's really going on. But you just don't want to call any attention to that situation at all.
The idea of Luthen has this loose thread running around that is Cassian, and Mon's got this loose thread with her friend from Trandrilla. It's close enough. Like that, but there's also the thread that Mon has with her husband.
Yeah, and her daughter.
And she's way more exposed than Luthen is.
Yeah, I mean, she told him that.
And so it's just that whole, just the whole process of what was going on in that dinner was just their party or dinner party, whatever it was just I love all of that kind of political conversation within the Star Wars. Let's get to the guy who's the show is named after. There's something about Cassian comes to terms with being in prison that I think they're going to explain more in the next episode, because they transfer him to Nakina 5. The shoe thing, we'll get into the shoe thing in a minute. He gets introduced to his building crew, run by Andy freaking Serkis.
He's so hot right now.
Oh my god. Vulture said he was overacting like usual. I don't think he was overacting. That's exactly the type of person that you want Andy Serkis to play.
Yeah.
That I'm almost out of here. Don't mess this up for me.
Yeah.
I'm in charge of this whole entire group. Like, that's a perfect casting for that. But it just, as soon as he turned around and then, like, the camera panned back and you kind of lost his face, I'm like, was that Andy Serkis? And then he's actually on screen, and it's just, that was not something I expected to see in this show.
Yeah.
But the big thing is, the prison itself, all of the there's no weapons except for the electrified floor that shocks everybody into, like, it's like you're getting tased, but it's much worse. And they can do the entire floor. And the assembly line things that they're doing, I have many questions about. They seem ambiguous, like they're not really anything important.
I think they're part of a Death Star.
It could be we're in that time period where the Death Star is being built in multiple places in multiple ways, but I could also take it as, they're just making them work 12 hours a day, make it competitive, and
but it feels like the orders are out there that we're trying to build this Death Star. Yeah. They only have 5 years. By the time we see it in Rogue One, it's a fully formed Death Star. Yeah. It's a fully formed planet. So they've got to be working on it right now.
They are.
And slave labor, imprisoned labor.
Yeah.
You're not, all you're paying for other than the materials is to keep them fed and housed.
Yep.
And, and honestly, it's, they pointed out when they first get there, this is, if you've been in other prisons, you're going to see that this is notably different. They're trying to keep them healthy. They're trying to keep them clean. They give them all the food they want. Well, food, that they want, water. It's a better life than probably a lot of them have had on their own, which can serve to break them down a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Make them more compliant because it's clean, and I don't have, all I got to do is go make the widget every day, and then they are trying to move it along as fast as possible, so they impose start these races, games, whatever, and they give them the heads, they give them incentive to move that along, and by assign, I mean, I think it's brilliant. I mean, I'm not necessarily for the prison system, but
it's a brilliant way to, one, show the oppression that is the Empire, but also it's a simple solution to a very complicated problem that is the Death Star. And so if you can just, put strange laws and over sentence everybody.
Right. Well, and they've all been saying how it's been ramping up, which is a byproduct of the of the heist, but it helps them out because now they've got more people to put in there to to build the thing.
The big thing that happens, at least I feel, through this is once Cassian gets introduced and they kind of figure out what they're doing with the building the widget thing, they all go back to their cells for the day. And before they lock down the cell, they all stand around. They start asking Cassian about the outside world, and they all said like all of their time got doubled and tripled within the last month, and so they're asking questions of why this is all happening. They've all heard rumors of something happening, but nothing like definitive, because you're in prison. You're not getting communications every day.
They don't have TVs.
Right. And so that kind of conversation, and Cassian, like he did with the group before the heist, played dumb, and he isn't going by his name, which is a really good thing. We're going to finish with that conversation, but him not giving them anything. A couple of them get really angry with him, and a couple of them kind of come to his defense, like, of course he doesn't know anything. He's in here. He's probably dumb.
Right.
And so it was just, I think that's a bigger, I think a lot of the stuff that happens around the prison is to explain that they are the Empire. We got it in the last episode with the accelerated trial and the bigger sentencing and stuff like that. And now the people who are actually in prison, who are working hard to get out to be rehabilitated, are getting extra time because now the rebels are starting to do things, and it's all building on that oppression and stuff. Let's talk about Serial, Deidre, all of that stuff before we get out of here real quick. Deidre goes to Serial. Surreal. It's
Cyril.
I
like cereal because he's been eating cereal almost every episode.
To question him about what happened on Ferrex and how he lost his job and all that stuff, and she doesn't believe anything that he says, and he says that he was forced to sign this report against his will, and then they give him the official statement, and he starts pointing out stuff that wasn't in the actual official statement, and she's asking for more information, and he doesn't have much to give her, or is not willing to give her anything, but asks her, I found him in 2 days. I can be an asset to you, which I think is a setup for later on when they can't find him.
Yeah, she may come
or
back.
He's going to find that Cassian's in the prison system. And stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think he just doesn't know. I mean, if you remember back, he was fairly useless in the whole, going into the town and everything. He super green, had no idea what he was doing. So and not, people were like being shot around him, and he's not an actual soldier, or like he's a security guard. Like, stop or I'll throw my keys. Right. And now the poop's really going down, and he's like, ah!
Right.
So, and that frustrates her because he's like, submitting these requests, like 5 requests or 6 requests in a month, for information.
For information, which is a big deal because he wants to get to the bottom of what actually happened, and she wants to get to the bottom of what's happening with the rebellion, which is what
he wants. Cassian. He doesn't want to get to the bottom of what happened. He wants
Cassian
because he screwed him out of his life.
Right. And the idea that I'm trying to look up. I cannot remember the ISB agent. He's such a big deal. From who's in Rebels. He's at the meeting with Vader on the Death Star, and I cannot remember his name. Somebody's got to tell me in the comments and just be nice. But him questioning Deirdre at the ISB meeting, and her like here's the evidence of that they're stealing stuff. Here's all the clues that are doing it.
And he's just looking at dollar signs. He's like, this is a lot of money.
And it's justified from Deirdre's point of view, and then she gets back up from Dad. I'm going to keep calling him Dad until I'm told differently. But him backing her up that this is actually a bigger deal than what a lot of people in the room have been trying to do or whatever.
Yep.
And I just that whole scene is really interesting about her. Even though in the last episode she kind of like punched her way through the door, now she's in the door and now she's making haymakers for people for this big thing because she thinks there's actually something more to it.
Yeah.
And she's looking for the, what do they call it, the access point, the central point.
That the axiom?
It's something like that, where they're going after Cassian to get to the person who's doing all these rebel actions.
Yeah, it was the axiom, which is Luthen.
Right. Which is why Luthen's so nervous. Yeah. And then her on Ferrix torturing the shopkeeper, and then they kind of leave it open to torturing of Bix, and so it's showing the true nature of the ISB is very interesting. There's a bunch of other stuff that happens. Vel and Cinta on Ferrix looking for Cassian as well. They kind of have a moment of, you love me because I'm a mirror for you, and Cinta's like, I need to stay, you need to go. It looks weird if we're both here, but she's watching Marvana's apartment, like waiting for Cassian to come home, except Cassian's in person.
Yeah.
And so there's there's all these little not Easter eggs. There's all these little threads laying out there that are all going to get pulled at some point in time. And I think when the rebellion starts on Ferrix, Cinta's going to be in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And, and it's going to be a big deal. So.
Yep.
And she dies, we all riot. And if they take out B2,
I was going to say, if B2 dies.
B2 dies, I'm marching to freaking Lucasfilm with pitchforks and torches, and I'll get a bunch of people in the way. There's a ton of stuff in this episode. It's amazing what they've been doing. I think that's where we're gonna cover. We're gonna stop now, or we'll go for another hour. Let us know what you thought of our discussion about this episode in the comments down below. Like I said, please be nice. It's a requirement around here. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, and follow us on all the social media stuff: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Links in the description down below. And until next time, cult members, good afternoon, good evening, and good night now.